Public relations is a real sort of benign-sounding term to describe propaganda. Propaganda is conducted as a multi-billion-dollar business. No one's ever heard of these major PR firms like Burson Marsteller, Edelman, Hill & Knowlton. These are giant companies owned by even bigger advertising firms no one's ever heard of. But these advertising and PR firms, of course, touch our lives every day through all these sophisticated messages. They like to stay behind the scenes, and they don't want the light shown on them. What we do at PR Watch is we try to shine the light on them and explain how they work in manipulating news, information, and public opinion. On the opposite side of every single issue are these multi-million-dollar PR campaigns, propaganda campaigns that involve intelligence gathering, message development, use of third-party independent experts as spokespeople, media manipulation, perception management.
Just close your eyes and take long, deep breaths.
Public relations works by putting its message in the mouths of people we trust. It might be Tom Brokaw, it might be some expert that Dan Rather has on the evening news. And the dirty little secret is that on any given day, 40, 50, 60% or more of what we see, hear, and read as news is in fact public relations. The big corporate media gladly cooperates with its advertisers, the milk industry, the food industry, the biotech industry. Why? Because billions and billions and billions of dollars that flow from corporations into the media as advertising is what makes the media so profitable. Candidates, toothpaste, genetically engineered food are all sold to us in the same way through advertising and PR campaigns. So the best propaganda is invisible, the best public relations is invisible. And as Alex Carey pointed out in his book, Taking the Risk Out of Democracy, public relations is how propaganda is waged in countries like the United States.
Long, deep breaths.
The consolidation of ownership of the press, publishing, radio, television, and film makes the coordination of propaganda possible. The primary means for controlling people is the absolute control of information. Men in power often withhold information for selfish ends. They often present false information as a diversion for the same reason. Words can inform or misinform. What people think can be controlled by controlling information.
So we were doing statistics on whether the sales correlated with the amount of money they spent in advertising campaigns on television and in newspapers. And so I was measuring marketing research, brainwashing of the American public. I was measuring how that goes about and putting it on charts, commercial brainwashing. I had an apartment on Nob Hill, and I had a suit like I do now, and I was clean-shaven, and I had a girlfriend, and I had taken some peyote and looked out of the window onto the red, glaring sky gulf of downtown San Francisco, looking down from Nob Hill. It reminded me that the center of our civilization was a kind of inhuman ambition. So the word Moloch sprung to mind from the Bible. The god that it's the god that children are sacrificed to the war god Moloch by their family. And I think there's a line in the Bible, thou shalt not pass thy seed through the fire to Moloch.
Moloch, whose eyes are 1,000 blind windows. Moloch, whose skyscrapers stand in the long streets like endless Jehovah's. Moloch, whose factories dream and croak in the fog. Moloch, whose smokestacks and antennae crown the cities. Moloch, whose love is endless oil and stone. Mohawk whose soul is electricity and banks. Mohawk whose poverty is the specter of genius. Mohawk whose fate is a cloud of sexless hydrogen. Mohawk whose name is the mind. Mohawk in whom I sit lonely. Mohawk in whom I dream angels. Crazy in Mohawk.
From Washington, D.C., he's intellectual, author, and linguist, Professor Noam Chomsky. Manufacturing Consent. What is that title meant to describe?
Well, the title is actually borrowed from a book by Walter Lippmann, written back around 1921, in which he described what he called the manufacture of consent as a revolution in the practice of democracy. What it amounts to is a technique of control. And he said this was useful and necessary because the common interests, the general concerns of all people, elude the public. The public just isn't up to dealing with them, and they have to be the domain of what he called a specialized class. Notice that that's the opposite of the standard view about democracy. There's a version of this expressed by the highly respected moralist and theologian Reinhold Niebuhr, who was very influential on contemporary policymakers. His view was that rationality belongs to the cool observer, but because of the stupidity of the average man, he follows not reason but faith. And this naive faith requires necessary illusion and emotionally potent oversimplifications, which are provided by the myth maker to keep the ordinary person on course. It's not the case, as the naive might think, that indoctrination is inconsistent with democracy. Rather, as this whole line of thinkers observes, it's the essence of democracy. The point is that in a military state or a feudal state or what we would nowadays call a totalitarian state, it doesn't much matter what people think because you've got a bludgeon over their head and you can control what they do. But when the state loses the bludgeon, when you can't control people by force, and when the voice of the people can be heard, you have this problem. It may make people so curious and so arrogant that they don't have the humility to submit to a civil rule, and therefore you have to control what people think. And the standard way to do this is to resort to what in more honest days used to be called propaganda, manufacture of consent, creation of necessary illusions, various ways of either marginalizing the general public or reducing them to apathy in some fashion.